Hello, this is Peter Falk, and you're listening to the Columbo Files on the Ludic Lounge, hosted by Antonicus Maximus and John Soares.
Hello, good listeners, and welcome to another file. Unfortunately, in my opinion, maybe a subpar file of the Columbo Files. I am your co-host, if I can talk, co-host. There we go. Co-host. I can use words. I have a mouth. I am your co-host, John Soares. With me, as always, not rambling like I am, is the man, the myth, the gluteus to the Maximus, Antonicus Gluteus Maximus the Fourth. Bid a good hello there to the people, Anthony.
Hello there to the people. Now, John, art thou not fatal vision sensible, to feeling as to sight, or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat-oppressed brain?
Well, you're a better actor than Nicholas Frame, I'll say that much. Folks, we are going to get into it this week. We are talking about 1972's Season 2 episode, Dagger of the Mind, which features a prominent moment, well, a prominent play from the bard himself, William Shakespeare. And it's our first locations shoot for Columbo, if I am so bold. This episode was partially shot in London, and we have some Brits in the cast, even though one of them is not a Brit. Anthony, would you like to take it away?
Well, John, as you so honorably mentioned, London is calling from a faraway land.
Oh, jeez. And battles come down.
So,
I'm not familiar with my Clash. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So, loyal listeners, I'm going to give you a rundown of tonight's actors, and John, of course, is going to intervene, as he so lovingly does. One thing I wanted to mention about our cast tonight is Jesus Christ did these people work, and I feel like it's going to take me 2 hours just to go through their work.
Yeah, so without further ado, I think we should get into it. Our murderers this week, Anthony, we have two. We have a duo, one of the few in the history of Columbo. We have Nicholas Frame, played by Richard Basehart, and Lillian Stanhope, a married couple. And Lillian Stanhope is played by the legendary Honor Blackman. If I can begin with Richard Basehart, Anthony.
Bass, do 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 do. Heart, do 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 do. Bass, do 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 do. Heart.
Bad acting.
Oh man, I'm gonna get to one of my favorite parts of this episode coming up. With that, so happens to mention and be a part of Richard Basehart's performance tonight, and he started way back in 1947, John. And I'm going to talk about his honorable mentions.
Yeah, I will say this though: he's an American.
Oh yeah, big time, big time. Like his accent wasn't like Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins bad, but I was like, yeah.
I say, hello, Mary Poppins. It's not like that,
exactly,
but it's probably worse.
So
that's how I can describe Nicholas Frame.
Fair enough. So, loyal listeners, because every episode of Columbo Files is somebody's first episode. When I say honorable mentions, when I say, I'm going to go over things that these people were in, it's stuff that I would, for the most part, recognize, or some of their highlights that, like, IMDb highlights. So, obviously, these people did a lot more than, like, 10 to 12 projects, but this is just stuff that, as the layman, the common man, we would recognize them from.
Indeed. Otherwise, we're going to be doing, the Nicholas Frame hour. And
exactly.
I don't think any of us want to do that unless we get into the more specific stuff. But that's,
that's neither here nor there.
That's a whole nother podcast.
But what is here, John, is yes. Richard Basehart starred in the 1953 movie Titanic as George Healey, which I found out was an actual movie before the 1997 Titanic movie.
Yeah, and funny enough, Titanic's going to be a recurring theme in this episode. Because we have a couple incarnations of the Titanic story with different actors, which we'll bring up as they come up.
And there's going to be another movie that's going to be brought up that I swear to God, loyal listeners, just about every cast member starred in that film. But I divulge. We'll get into that later. After his 1953 appearance in Titanic, he played in 1956's feature film Moby Dick, where he played the main role of Ishmael.
So, can I call him Ishmael?
I knew that joke was coming. I really did. But you know what? You landed it. So I'm not going to ask you to file it. It's going to stay.
No, as it should. Continue, please.
Sure, absolutely. Portrait in Black in 1960, he played as character Howard Mason. He starred in episode 2 of Rawhide. He starred in the feature film Hitler as Adolf Hitler in 1962, John.
Yeah, he's got a face where he would look like he would play a Hitler at one point.
So you're saying he's got a face that you just want to punch for democracy?
I mean, kind of.
Yeah, fair enough. He was in episodes of Route 66. He was in episodes of Combat, The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, The Twilight Zone, Lost in Space, Danger, Will Robinson, Danger.
Danger, Will Robinson, Danger, Danger, Will Robinson.
He was also in The Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea from 1964 to 1968 as Admiral Harriman Nelson.
Yeah, this was a starring role for him. He was Admiral Nelson for a number of seasons in that show. I believe the entirety of the run. It's also A Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea is a favorite of my dad's too.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
Speaking of not favorites of your dad, he starred in Ironside, Gunsmoke, Hawaii Five-0. But John,
yes, Anthony,
you know that Richard Basehart starred in The Streets of San Francisco, where in fact he wore a flower in his hair.
Do you have absolute confirmation of that? Because I
have 0% confirmation on that.
I got to tell you, every time, it's still Michael Douglas.
Fair. And every time I say, fair enough. He also starred in episodes of Little House on the Prairie in 1976, Time Travelers, How the West Was Won in 1978 as Colonel Flint. He also starred in W.E.B. in 1978 as Gus Dunlap, The Love Boat, and John, Knight Rider.
Yeah, Knight Rider, he had a major role as, according to IMDb, the narrator and Wilton Knight, I believe, Michael Knight's father. I'm not that familiar with Knight Rider, so I'm guessing.
John, what I can say is that compared to tonight's episode, it's clearly night and day.
What, a Night and Day starring Cameron Diaz and Tom Cruise?
Oh, God damn it. No, John. You know I don't like that movie.
You know you love me.
I came off very angry there. I apologize for the listeners.
A little bit. Funny you mentioned Streets of San Francisco, though, Anthony.
Because he wore a flower in his hair.
No, still Michael Douglas. But I have a note here that Mr. Basehart was nominated for a BAFTA award for his role in the movie Time Limit. That was the directorial debut of Michael Douglas's co-star in The Streets of San Francisco, Carl Malden, the nose himself.
I am clearly floored.
Yeah. I know my shit.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. And speaking of knowing your shit, John.
Yes, indeed.
Honor Blackman knew her shit.
Yes, she did. I'll take the lead on this one. Honor Blackman, it was a British actress of very well regarded esteem and renown. Her career in acting started on the stage in the 1940s, which she carried on stage roles throughout her life. Notably, she was in a 1981 revival of The Sound of Music, Anthony.
Oh,
yeah, and she also was in the West End production in 1987 of Nonsense. Get it? Nonsense.
Damn it! I love it.
Guest appearance by the Flying Nun. She also returned to the theater in the mid 2000s for a production of My Fair Lady.
Oh, good for her.
Her film career started in 1947. She had a non-speaking part in a film called Fame is the Spur, which was about a British politician who rises to power and then abandons his radical views for more conservative ones, which reminds me of a Robert Redford movie called The Candidate.
Yes.
Yeah. funny enough, she also starred in some westerns. First one in 1968 with her Bond star Sean Connery and Bridget Bardot called Shalako.
Oh,
And something
Shalako, starring me and Honor Blackman. The day is mine.
And are you wearing any panties?
And I'm not wearing any panties.
Yes, indeed. She was also
a rare impression, loyal listeners, that I myself, Antonicus Maximus, can do.
Yes, that's right. I am the last of my kind.
And of course, John does it way, way better.
That's not what your mother said last night.
My God.
Too many people who have died this year that were in this conversation, because Honor Blackman did pass away this year along with Trebek and Sean Connery, as everybody knows.
Oh my God, that's right.
Holy crap.
I forgot she passed away this year.
Yeah. She was also in a Western called Something Big with Dean Martin.
I bet there was.
Yeah. She played Hera and Jason in the Argonauts, Anthony.
In 1963. I was going to mention that.
Yeah, and this film is very noted for its stop motion animation by Ray Harryhausen.
Yep.
So, friend of the show, Robin, please don't watch Jason the Argonauts. I know you're afraid of stop motion.
I forgot about that.
TV-wise, in the UK, she had a notable part in The Avengers, Anthony, but not those Avengers.
Not those Avengers, where she played Catherine Gale.
Yes, she was pre-Diana Rigg. So everybody tends to remember The Avengers as Steed and Peel, which is the incarnation of the show after Honor Blackman left the show. Diana Rigg's character, Emma Peel, tends to be the more iconic of the two. Or there was a couple lead changes, what I learned. Apparently, The Avengers started with a man. It was two men, and then it turned into a man and a woman, which I was surprised. I thought it was Patrick McNee and Diana Rigg, but
yeah,
shows what I know.
Yeah,
yeah, and The Avengers is important for Honor Blackman's history because it was what got her the role that made her most famous, her part in Goldfinger, the James Bond film where she played Pussy Galore.
And talk about iconic, John. Like one of the most iconic Bond films, one of the most iconic lines. The name's Pussy Galore. I must be dreaming.
That Goldfinger is internationally famous for setting the tempo of every single Bond film that followed it. It made Sean Connery even more of a star than he was post those initial Bond films. The Avengers even pokes fun at the fact that Honor Blackman went to do a James Bond movie because there's a Christmas card that John Steed receives from Kathy Gale. And, he says, whatever can she be doing at Fort Knox, which is an important plot point for Goldfinger. And notably enough, Honor Blackman is the oldest actress, at least at the time, one of the oldest actresses to play the female lead in a James Bond movie. She was only surpassed by Monica Bellucci in Daniel Craig's last outing, or more recent outing, Spectre. Honor Blackman was 38 and 5 years older than Sean Connery was.
Oh.
At the time of filming a Goldfinger. Monica Bellucci then beat her by 1 year at the age of 39.
Now, John, you mentioned iconic roles. I'd also like to mention Miss Honor Blackman's iconic role, where she starred in Doctor Who as Professor Lasky, Colin Baker, and this was the Colin Baker sixth Doctor of the Doctor Who franchise.
I don't have any Doctor Who impressions. I'm sorry.
Exterminate.
That's
about as far as I go.
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
Alonzi.
We're losing track of the show. Too much lounge cast.
Okay, so to move forward, John. She
Yes.
starred in The Upper Hand as Laura West from 1990 to 1996, was a TV show. She also starred in the 2001 movie, John, that I watched a lot of. And that was Bridget Jones's Diary, where she played Penny Husbands Bosworth.
That is correct. I have not seen that movie, so I'm going to take your word for it.
Oh, it's a great film. Great romantic comedy. In a sense. Kind of toxic now that you kind of watch it back. But that's besides the point. She finished up her acting career in 2015, at least according to IMDb, in the movie, I believe it is, in You, Me, and Them.
Yeah, I think that is a movie. That sounds like a movie.
Sounds
I
like a
remember
movie.
hearing that title. I don't remember. But we have other people to get to, Anthony, and we have our victim this week, Sir Roger Haversham, played by John Williams. No, not that one.
I was going to make that joke.
John Williams was a Tony Award-winning English stage, film, and TV actor. Funny enough, Anthony, he does have a connection to music.
Really?
Yes. He got some notice beyond his acting career for being the star of a telecast commercial for 120 music masterpieces, a 4 LP or 4 LP set of classical music excerpts from Columbia House.
Oh.
It was apparently, according to the sources that are linked to on Wikipedia, that commercial was the longest running nationally seen commercial in US TV history. It ran for 13 years.
Wow. That's amazing. Now, John, he also has a link to the telephone companies. Do you know this?
Really? No,
Yes.
I did not.
He was in Dial M for Murder.
I was going to say, did he get on to the Amici and called for murder?
Absolutely. He did that in 1954 as Chief Inspector Hubbard. And back-to-back iconic movies he starred in, John. So not only the Alfred Hitchcock vehicle I just previously mentioned, but he starred in the 1954 classic Sabrina as Thomas Fairchild. And this movie is the Audrey Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart vehicle that got remade, I believe, in the late 80s, early 90s, could be mid-90s, with Harrison Ford, essentially. And it's the premise of it is Audrey Hepburn is this young, beautiful woman who is attracted to these two men, one of them Humphrey Bogart, the other one I can't remember because I didn't write down his name. And essentially, there's like a love triangle between Humphrey Bogart, his brother, and Audrey Hepburn. Humphrey Bogart's brother essentially is in love with Audrey Hepburn in this film, but the better match for Audrey Hepburn's character is Humphrey Bogart. They just click better. They have better chemistry. It's just he's significantly older than his younger brother. It's a great film. I highly recommend all of you out there to watch it. And John, I recommend that you watch it as well.
Oh, well, I might just do that. I might do a double feature with that and the remake if the remake's worth it.
I don't think I ever saw the remake, so I can't speak to that. I just know that it starred Harrison Ford and the guy from Wild Wild West who co-starred next to
Kevin Kline.
Kevin Kline, thank you.
Oh, that's an interesting. That's like high level energy and then low level stoner energy.
I could be mistaken, so don't get me wrong.
Yeah, we'll check it in post. So a couple things about Dial M for Murder, Anthony, that I wanted to tag up on before we get into more of Mr. Williams' career. Did you know that John Williams played the part of Chief Inspector Hubbard for Dial M for Murder on the stage?
I did not know that, John.
He was the initial Chief Inspector Hubbard, and when Hitchcock adapted the play, he cast Williams in the same role.
Good for him, because he rocks it.
And he plays Hubbard again in a TV movie adaptation of Dial M for Murder.
Well, I mean, why not, man?
Yeah, you might as well. I mean, just when you got it, flaunt it. He had a pretty lengthy collaboration with Hitchcock throughout his career. He was in 3 Hitchcock films. He was in The Parodying Case in 1947, which featured Gregory Peck as the lead. He had a minor role in that. He was a lawyer, or a barrister, as the Brits say. Dial M for Murder, as you so mentioned, and To Catch a Thief in 1955 with Cary Grant and Grace Kelly.
And he starred as H.H. Hewson.
Yeah, and then this is not counting a number of episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, 3 of which that John Williams was in, Hitchcock directed himself.
Interesting. Now, John, did you know that I sorely made a mistake about Mr. Kline, and it was Harrison Ford and Greg Kinnear?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, they kind of look the same. So, in my defense.
Speaking of defense, Anthony, and thank you for this, he was Mr. Williams was also in the Billy Wilder film Witness for the Prosecution.
That was a great transition.
Thank you. You gave it. You set it up wonderfully. He was also in The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, one of Wilder's later films, which caught my attention because apparently John Williams' scenes were among the hour to 75 minutes cut by the studio. So he's in the movie and then almost completely excised because
this sucks.
Yeah, apparently the studio changed his mind on the format of release. It was going to be a roadshow release, so it was going to be a lot longer. And they decided, screw that. We're going to cut it out. And unfortunately, all of that footage has been lost. So we'll never know what the true format of The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes would have been.
What we do know, John, speaking of Sherlock Holmes, is he starred in 1972's The Hound of Baskervilles.
A TV movie that, from what my research dredged up, was very not well received.
Yeah, but John, you know what is well received is that everybody in this episode just about stars in this made-for-TV movie.
Really?
Yeah, this 1972 Hound of Baskervilles, like I'll mention, this was the one I teased from earlier in the episode that a lot of people starred in this film.
Okay.
Speaking of which, people who starred in this film, John, I have to scroll up because this is out of order. So as I'm scrolling up, I want to let you know that Bernard Fox as Detective Chief Superintendent Dirk tonight, John.
He started in this film. Titles, though?
What's that?
Could he have more titles?
I know, right? Good Lord. It's the stash, man. It gets him every time.
He's a proper Welshman.
And speaking of proper, I'm going to try to properly tell you of just how much TV and film this man was in, because he worked.
He worked.
With a capital W. He started back in 55, 56 in the TV series Sixpenny Corners, Tom Norton, which I'm assuming is like a BBC television show because I didn't recognize it.
Your Connery slipped out there.
Yeah, I know. It subconsciously did, unfortunately. He starred in 3 Live Wires in 1961 as Malcolm. He starred in episodes of General Hospital, The Danny Thomas Show, The Dick Van Dyke Show, Perry Mason, The Flintstones, Andy Griffith Show, I Spy, Burke's Law, I Dream of Jeannie, The Girl from U.N.C.L.E., which I found out was a thing.
Say what?
Yeah, there was a TV show that ran titled The Girl from U.N.C.L.E.
Huh.
Yeah, interesting.
Lovely.
He starred in 12 O'Clock High, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Monkees, The Wild Wild West 1969 TV show, Ironside, Hogan's Heroes, in 1965 to 1970 as Colonel Crittenden / Sir Charles Chitterley. He also starred in episodes of The Partridge Family, the movie I previously mentioned, The Hound of Baskervilles, as Dr. Watson.
Yes.
Where Stuart Granger played Sherlock Holmes himself. He starred in episodes of Bewitched as Dr. Bombay, and he'll reprise that role later on in the Bewitched spinoff, Tabitha.
Fun fact about this role, Anthony, you are right that he does reprise it in the sequel Tabitha to Bewitched, but he is one of the few actors to have played the same part on 3 different TV shows. So he starts with Dr. Bombay, who is a witch doctor, for those of you who are unaware with Bewitched. I have very limited knowledge, but he starts the role in Bewitched in 1964, reprises it again in 1976 in the sequel show Tabitha, and then a third time in 1999 in Passions.
Yes, which I know very well because growing up, my mother watched this soap opera, and it was right before Days of Our Lives, or could have been right after Days of Our Lives on NBC. So I watched a lot of those 2 soap operas.
So would you say that watching all of those shows were the days of your life?
I was going to say they were my passions.
Oh, we're bad today.
We're the worst.
Some film stuff, if I may be so bold to.
Please be so bold.
Some notable films that caught my attention, Anthony. He had a voice role in the Disney animated films, The Rescuers and The Rescuers Down Under, as the chairman in both of those. He was in, and we talked about this off mic, because this turned up to be a little bit of a theme. He was in James Cameron's epic Titanic, starring Leo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet as Colonel Archibald Gracie. And funny enough, he was in an earlier version that adapted the tragedy of the Titanic, 1958's A Night to Remember. He's uncredited in this movie, but he gets to deliver this line. Iceberg, dead ahead, sir.
That's iconic, man. Why didn't they credit him? I'd credit him for that.
I mean, I don't know. But more importantly, he was Captain Winston Havelock in the 1999 movie The Mummy, starring Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz.
Which is where I recognize him the most, to be quite
yes. I could just, the moment I saw that, I just heard Brendan Fraser yelling Winston in the back of my head.
Winston! Yep.
Winston!
John, you mentioned some great movies he was in. I just also want to mention a couple more to sprinkle on some TV shows. Did you know he starred in MASH as well as What's Happening and What's Happening as generic British guy, essentially?
Oh, good Lord. He was also in The Jeffersons.
Yes, he was. He essentially, like, if you think 1970s television, crud, we definitely need a British man. Who are we going to call? You call Bernard Fox, baby.
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't get Higgins in Magnum PI.
He should have. I like Higgins in Magnum PI, but I'm saying he would have done a bang-up job as Higgins.
He was also in perennial favorite of the show, Murder, She Wrote.
Of course, the sister show to Columbo.
Of course. He had
Punky Brewster.
Punky Brewster. Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Whoa! You said the magic word, John.
What? You just went crazy on me.
Yeah, because Pee-wee's Playhouse, no, they'd say a magic word, everything would shift around. Everything
I remember.
Crazy. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
But more importantly than Pee-wee's Playhouse, Anthony, he was in and did a voice role for Chip and Dale.
Yeah, that's right.
Chip and Dale. Rescue Rangers. Chip and Dale.
Which also, fun fact for those loyal listeners listening at home that did not know this, if you look really closely and think back on Chip and Dale, the two outfits they wore are two 80s iconic action stars, John.
Yeah. Funny enough, they kind of almost played the other's roles, I think, if I recall.
Yes.
So
you're right.
Yeah. So one is I don't know which one's which, or which one wore which, but one of them wore Indiana Jones's fedora and leather jacket, and the other one wore Magnum PI's very famous red Hawaiian shirt.
It's called an Aloha shirt. I'm just correcting you.
An Aloha shirt. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
He was also in Dharma and Greg, the sitcom, and an old favorite of mine, because I don't think many people remember this, but I think our generation will, Anthony. He was in the Cartoon Network show Time Squad. Do you remember Time Squad?
Oh my God. Wow, you just tickled a memory, John, that I have not thought of.
Now, do you know who starred in Time Squad? So the lead character, Otto, was voiced by a woman named Pamela Adlon, because, most young boys are voiced by girls because, no puberty, at least in the male characters. But Larry 3000 was voiced by Mark Hamill.
Get out of town.
Yeah, where he's playing the grumpiest C-3PO he can probably imagine. And Buck Todd Russell was played by perennial Ninja Turtle and Pinky himself, Rob Paulson.
That's a heck of a cast.
Yeah, that's a great cast. And it was one of my favorite cartoons when I was a kid.
It was a great show.
It was a great show.
And speaking of shows that maybe weren't so great because I didn't really watch them because they were mainly in Britain, John, Wilfrid Hyde-White as Tanner in tonight's episode.
Yes, and Wilfrid Hyde-White and Bernard Fox both have two Columbo episodes to their names, Anthony. This is for each of them. This is their first Columbo episode, and they will be back later on as we progress through the show. I have a quote from Mr. Hyde-White, Anthony, that I'd like to regale you with, if I may be so bold.
You may be so bold, John.
So he attended Marlborough College and the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, of which he said about this: I learned two things at RADA. I can't act, and it doesn't matter.
That's great.
And based on his performance, no, he really didn't give a damn whether or not people thought he was bad. He was just like, I'm going to do a thing. I did the thing. Pay me. And which kind of fits the character.
Yeah, it fits the character, John, and it also fits the fact that he did a lot of work back in 1934. A lot of movies, a lot of TV shows, nothing I could recognize. Again, he started in 1934. One I did sort of pseudo recognize was Murdered by the Rope in 1936, Alistair Dane. And again, John, so much work in 40s and 50s. Nothing I could recognize. I'm assuming a lot of that is British, BBC or something of the like. But going all the way up to 1963, starting episodes of The Twilight Zone. He starred in My Fair Lady, as we previously mentioned, in 1964 as Colonel Hugh Pickering, and which is essentially, if you read the synopsis, John, it's essentially the predecessor to She's All That from the early 2000s, late 90s.
I believe She's All That is an adaptation of My Fair Lady, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I didn't want to quote that because I wasn't 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure you are correct.
Yeah.
But John, he also starred in Peyton's Place in 1967 as Martin Peyton. He starred in episodes of Mission Impossible, Battlestar Galactica, the OG 78 version as Sire Anton.
He was in the pilot.
The pilot.
He was in the pilot for Battlestar Galactica.
Absolutely. As Sire Anton. And again, kind of like it because it's kind of like my name. So, he also starred in episodes of Laverne and Shirley, The Associates, and then John Buck Rogers in the 25th Century in 1981 as Dr. Goodfellow.
Isn't that the one? Isn't that the show with the robot that goes beady, beady, beady?
Pretty sure.
This is all based off of like obscure VH1 trivia that I got in high school.
Yeah, absolutely. Episodes of Fantasy Island he also starred in, and he finished his acting career in 1983.
Now, Anthony, I wanted to bring up a couple of other notable credits you missed over in your research, but that's neither here nor there. He also had a part in 1980s Xanadu.
Oh, I did skip that. Xanadu!
With Olivia Newton-John. It was with her starring vehicle, and it was apparently a giant turd of a movie.
But John, that soundtrack bangs.
Yeah, that soundtrack is probably what saved that movie from obscurity.
Especially ELO's version of Xanadu. Like, that is a great-ass song.
That is a great... Well, ELO is just magic.
Excellent. Yeah, fair enough.
Now, there's one very important TV credit that you missed over, Anthony. He was in a show that was at the Chrysler Theater. And it was Bob Hope, everybody. Bob Hope presents the Chrysler Theater. Bob Hope, everybody. Bob Hope.
You generally got me. You hooked me in. I was sitting here like, oh, man, I must have actually missed this. It was iconic. You son of a gun.
I am a turd of a human being, and I'm here for it.
You know who was not a turd of a human being?
Yes.
Allegedly. Was Arthur Millay as Joe Fenwick tonight, John.
Please, tell me about Joe.
So, Arthur Millay starred in a lot of TV. He started way back in 1956, but he starred in episodes of The Rifleman in 62, Dennis the Menace, the TV show, not the movie, a franchise from later on. He starred in the episodes of The Untouchables, Dr. Kildare. He starred in Mary Poppins as Mr. Dawes Jr.
I say, Mary Poppins. I'm Mr. Dawes Jr. there, Mary Poppins. Exactly.
He also starred in episodes of Perry Mason, Rawhide, The Dick Van Dyke Show, Andy Griffith Show, Please Don't Eat the Daisies, John, which is A Word of the Wise and also apparently a TV show back in that time.
Yeah, because you should be wearing them in your hair.
Absolutely. Starting episodes of The Fugitive, Bewitched, The Girl from U.N.C.L.E.
Second mention of that. Surprising.
Surprising, right? He also starred in the Heat of the Night, not the 1980s, early 90s sitcom, but apparently this was one in 1967, and he played character Ulam. He also starred in episodes of The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Monkees, Bonanza, Wild Wild West, I Dream of Jeannie, Mission Impossible. He starred in the film Bedknobs and Broomsticks, John, 1971, as Mr. Whittenfield.
That is a old Disney classic, if my memory serves me correctly.
Absolutely. And John, I'd be remiss to say, he also starred in 1972's The Hound of Baskervilles as Higgins.
Higgins.
Everybody was in this made-for-TV movie. Starred in Hawaii Five-0, Gunsmoke, Charlie's Angels, Wonder Woman, Barney Miller, Chips, The Secret of Nim as Mr. Ages in 1982. He starred in Casablanca. Now, John, not the movie from the 1940s that I absolutely love, and it's my all-time favorite movie of all time. He starred in a TV series prequel that starred in 1983. It starred David Soul, John. Do you know who David Soul is?
No.
Hutch from Starsky and Hutch, John. Hutch from Starsky and Hutch played Rick Blaine in the 1983 TV series prequel Casablanca.
I have no words.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing. I feel like since I so lovingly love the movie, I have to watch it just out of sheer obligation.
I don't know. I think that's a lot of nothing for you.
Probably because I don't think it lasted more than like 10 episodes. But John, our Mr. Arthur Millay starred in that TV series as Carl. He starred in The Facts of Life, MacGyver, Easy Street as Bobby in 1986 to 87, St. Elsewhere, 21 Jump Street, the Johnny Depp TV show, not the movie from a few years ago. He also starred in the Dick Tracy 1990 film, John. Did you know that? He was in that.
I have a soft spot for that movie.
I do too, absolutely. And I hate to admit it because it's like a dirty, dirty secret of mine, but I enjoy that film.
Didn't Pacino win an Oscar for that movie?
God, I don't know, but if that would be amazing.
I have to look this up on air.
As you do that, I'll filibuster with other things he starred in, John.
Please.
He starred in Days of Our Lives, the early 90s version, before I was watching this show with my mother as Nigel Peabody, episodes of Dallas, and where I recognize Mr. Arthur Millay most, John, he starred in 1990 film that starred Robin Williams alongside him, Pan. He starred as Toodles.
Oh.
The old man who, I lost my marbles.
Or you mean Hook?
That's what I meant. Hook. Yeah, I don't know why I say Pan. Yeah, Hook. Sorry.
Wait a minute. He's only been in the only Robin. What? You confused me.
Probably gonna edit that out, cut it, splice it together, and because I royally messed it up. Yeah, but I lost my marbles, John. It was like the saddest part of that whole film, and then he finds his marbles again at the end. It's just like super happy.
Yeah, that's a good
enough
moment.
of a filibuster for you?
Yes, it was, and Al Pacino was nominated for Best Supporting Actor in Dick Tracy.
Oh my god!
And for a BAFTA.
Oh my god! Why? What
was and a Golden Globe.
What was happening in 1990 besides me being born that he actually got nominated for that role?
Actually, it was 91, my birth year.
Oh, see? I was already a year old in this world when this travesty happened. But John...
And you knew it was a travesty, but we're getting off point.
We are getting off point because he also starred in the 1997 animated classic Anastasia.
Oh, that's a good movie.
Is it? Have you watched it recently?
Rose-colored glasses. Let me have it.
Fair enough, because I watched it. I tried to watch it about 2 to 3 years ago, and it doesn't hold up.
I really hope.
And also, John, I have an important announcement that I have to make on air because as you're saying, all these people are nominated for BAFTA. Mm-hmm. My loving wife, who is in the room as my recording, keeps thinking that you're saying they were nominated for bathtubs.
You better leave her laughing.
I'm going to leave the laughing because it was hilarious.
Oh, BAFTA. I'm going to get you an award that's just a gilded bathtub.
As you should. Now, speaking of golden awards that we should give a golden award to, I really like this character, John Fraser, that is starring as Sergeant O'Keefe. I just really like him. He has like a so minor role, but I like him.
Yeah, he's like only in the episode like maybe 10 minutes altogether. But
yeah, but he's just got that cool, I'm the cool cop. I'm the cool brick cop, man. I got the cool stash, the 70s hair. I'm just a cool cop, and I'm going to take you, around town for a little bit. But he starred, John, in 1960s role. I didn't write too much for him because he didn't have too much of note. He starred in The Trials of Oscar Wilde, 1960, as Lord Alfred Douglas. He starred in the movie Thundercloud in 1979, or it could have been a TV show. I don't quite remember. But he starred as Lieutenant Commander Monty Morgan. And just the name Thundercloud alone makes me want to watch this.
I mean, it sounds like something Stan Lee would have made up.
Right? My goodness gracious. And we have another Doctor Who announcement, John. He starred in the Tom Baker version in 1981 in Doctor Who.
No. Well,
he was a couple characters in that.
Oh.
He also starred in Young Sherlock, The Mystery of Manor House in 1982 as Uncle Gideon.
Oh. I didn't know Sherlock had an Uncle Gideon.
I didn't either. But, it was the 80s. They had to find something for their British broadcasting network.
Speaking of the 80s, Anthony, I think it's time to get into our crew.
Absolutely.
I don't know how that works, but I'm going to run with it.
Tonight's episode was directed by Richard Quinn, written by Jackson Gillis, and scored by our favorite John, Dick DeBenedictis.
Yes, DeBenedictis is returning from a couple episodes ago. I don't have them on hand at the moment, but If you've been listening, you
All
know
the
which
good
ones
ones.
they are. Yeah, some of our good ones. This episode,
Yeah, he
Jackson
kinda
Gillis
put the
is
check in the mail.
returning. Sorry?
I said, yeah, did a big Dick Benedictus kind of just cashed the check on this one. He just used like royalty-free English music.
I think so, and we can get into it because I think we could talk about a lot of his music at the top of the episode. But moving on to our writer, Jackson Gillis is returning from 2 episodes previously. He did season 1's Suitable for Framing and Short Fuse. This episode as well is based on a story that was provided to him by Levinson and Link. Now, our director is a former actor himself. He was an actor at the time, or not at the time of directing, but he was previously an actor and then transitioned into directing and producing. He started in radio, ended up working in vaudeville, and then started doing films in the 30s, notably with a young Mickey Rooney and Jackie Cooper. He also did some stage stuff. He was best known for his role as Frank Lippincott in the Broadway play My Sister Eileen, which Dexy's Midnight Runners then came upon.
I see what you did there.
It's a thinker.
It was a thinker. It was a thinker.
So his role in My Sister Eileen led him to get put under an MGM acting contract. His first film for MGM was a film called Babes on Broadway in 1941, opposite Judy Garland and old friend Mickey Rooney. His acting career stalled a little bit because he served in the Coast Guard during the Second World War. He became a lieutenant and served in public relations in San Francisco. So because of his military service, his acting career stalled, but it led to him and his friend William Asher deciding to go into production and directing. They ended up producing, and Quine later directed this film, an adaptation of a short story that was called Leather Gloves. It was a 1948 film, and he was still under contract with MGM, and this film was made for Columbia Pictures. So it was very successful, and then it led to him breaking contract with MGM and going to a long-term 7-year contract with Columbia. And then he had a number of films that he did for them. He also worked with Mr. Julie Andrews, Blake Edwards, on various things, various TV shows and films. A couple of things for Mickey Rooney as well. They did a film called Sound Off with Mickey Rooney and the Mickey Rooney TV show.
Now, John,
yes,
speaking of things that are done not all right, tonight's episode on the episode description, based off the DVD, is Columbo is set on bringing the curtain down with London theater impresario's killer in this drama-packed episode.
I think that's sign enough to get into it, so let's get into Act 1 in.
John, tonight's episode opens up in London with a very highfalutin soundtrack.
Yeah, it's a very stereotypical English soundtrack. You get a nice aerial shot of Parliament and Big Ben and Thames, and I like the opening music from De Benedictus. It's very much
it fits. It feels all right. Yeah,
it's very much a gimmick. He's playing into the locale, which is just like, okay, fine, I get it. It doesn't, keep the flame going on that candle as the episode progresses. Because to be honest, I kind of get a little sick of the music.
Yeah, it's as if, Great Britain never had anything like jazz or any other sort of music that they could play in the background like Dick Benedictus has done in his previous episodes, where he has like a nice, awesome soundtrack to a lot of these driving scenes.
Yes.
It is what it is, John. But as the music pans, we pans to Royal Court Theater, where we find a nice looking man there buying some flowers and going into the theater.
He gets out of an old-fashioned English sports car, and he goes into the theater after buying these flowers, and we are given our first glimpse of Honor Blackman as Lillian Stanhope, and boy, is Miss Stanhope a very demanding actress.
Yeah, there's no hope for that poor director, John.
No, absolutely not. Not even for that poorly ham-fisted pun.
We learned, though, John, that they're putting on a production of Macbeth.
Yes.
And then, so they're fighting. Nick himself is trying to pat down the flames. Apparently, he's showing up here drunk, according to the director, and he's telling everyone to get the hell out.
Yeah, a little bit of background. So we learned that the man that we saw come into the theater is the husband of the actress Lillian Stanhope. His name is Nicholas Frame. He's a flirty dog. There's a young woman named Miss Dudley. Yes, Miss Dudley, and he's just flirting with every large-breasted, beautiful woman that he comes across. Apparently, his wife is okay with it. He seems drunk. I'm not sure. It's an odd sequence, to be honest. I feel like Honor Blackman is really hamming it up. I had a note here. It feels like they popped out of an episode of the Adam West Batman, to be quite frank.
Yeah, I mean,
especially Basehart's accent. Something just feels very much like,
an American trying to do a British accent.
An American trying to do a stereotypical British accent.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like to me.
Exactly. So we go backstage, John, and we have an older gentleman rush into the backstage area when Nick is in his little room, and we have Lily doing her own thing in this backstage. We find out his name's Sir Rogers, and Lily is just smoozing all over him.
Yeah, Sir Roger Haversham. We learn that he is the owner of the theater and the backer of this particular production of Macbeth, which I will take the opportunity to say, as theater actors, why are they saying Macbeth? They would know better.
Yeah,
for our listeners at home who aren't familiar with some of the history of Shakespeare, Macbeth in particular is considered as the cursed play, and it is known for its history of very violent accidents that occur on its productions. And the tradition has developed that you don't say the name Macbeth, outside of the context of the performance, because that is what's inciting the curse of Macbeth.
Well, John, I think that maybe I'm reading into it too much. Maybe I'm trying to give them too much credit for this episode. But I think that plays a role in the episode itself, right? Because they mention the name, and then they have an accident happen, and then a lot of the story, as we'll soon find out, kind of mirrors in certain bits and parts.
Yeah, I do feel that Macbeth is meant to be, and I think I'm using the term correctly here. I believe they're analogizing the events of what happens to Nick and Lillian to what happens between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth.
Yeah. And that's why they kind of highlight in maybe too long of forms at certain parts where they're giving their performances, like Outgame Spot, and where Nick gives his monologue in a short bit that we'll talk about.
Yeah. So Roger Haversham is at the theater because he's not happy right now with Lillian Stanhope and Nicholas Frame. He feels that, after getting information that all of the romantic-esque trips that he had been taking with Lillian Stanhope had been purchased by her husband, Nicholas Frame, he is under the impression that they were leading him along and manipulating him in order to revitalize their acting career in a very elaborate stage performance.
Yeah. And I mean, how vain do you have to be as an actor or actress that you're going to just essentially pimp out your wife to this rich guy to get another shot on the stage? Like, that's some weird shit, man.
It is. And, they harp on the fact that Nick Frame is an older gentleman, and in show business terms, Lillian Stanhope is not the young flower she was, and that thereby would nuke her career options, which is, which shouldn't be the case, but unfortunately that's just what old industry does. Roger, reveals all of this, tells them both he's going to cancel the performance. It's over. It's done. We're moving on. And then he and Nick Frame get into what I'm going to call the worst struggle I have ever seen put to film.
With the worst murder I've ever seen, the most pathetic, because they're having this pithy little struggle, and then Lily throws a coffee cup.
I'm not sure what, I looked up on Columbo File for some trivia on this particular episode, and Columbo File calls it a cold cream jar. I don't know. We don't get enough, in my opinion, to actually see what she is grabbing.
I think you're right. It is a cold cream jar, because I remember Nick making, when they're later on, he's like, "Oh, did you wipe off the cold cream jar?" So it is like her cold cream. So it is like a beauty thing. So now that you mention that, it triggered that memory.
I mean, I'm glad you caught him saying that. To be quite honest, I did not. But she throws this jar. It clobbers Roger because Nick moves out of the way. Looks like they have an accidental death on their hands. But
the thing, John, it's like this tiny, even if it wasn't a coffee cup and it was this cold cream thing, it was like a minuscule jar. And I don't understand how it popped this dude in the head and he went down like a sack of potatoes.
Yeah, it's just like at worst, he would have like a very minor concussion.
And that's at the worst. That's even taking it to like the 10th degree, because it really should have just been popped in the head and go, "Ow, what the hell are you throwing things at me for?"
Yeah, so it's just weird. So to continue the weird, we learn, according to Lillian, that Roger was not seen by anybody. He's not. No one knows that he's there. They have no real idea if he talked to anybody before he showed up there. But as far as they know,
I don't know how they would know that. I didn't understand how she would know. She's like, "Oh yeah, nobody else has seen him." Like, really? Because you just saw him and you didn't check with anyone in the cast as of yet.
Yeah. So they hide him in a trunk and then go out to dress rehearsal. And we watch them do a snippet of Macbeth. And we come back to, or Lillian goes back to her dressing room where she complained about the heater.
Right. So she complained about the heater earlier. And before she goes back in the dressing room, a monologue that Nick is doing that we're focusing on is one of the things I just previously mentioned, John. He's doing the tomorrow. Essentially the monologue. I can't remember the exact monologue, but essentially he's going through the monologue that plays a little bit of a role of him slowly starting to, because when he gets flustered and he gets very anxiety riddled, he starts to fall back into this monologue at certain times throughout this episode.
Yeah.
So it's the start of that whole, like I said, semi-mirroring that the Macbeth scenery as play, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So we go to the dressing. Lillian goes to the dressing room. She comes across the most stereotypical British handyman fixing her heater.
Yes.
And he tries to fix the heater, but she kicks him out because he is almost about to discover the body in the trunk. I will say, and to go back to your comments on the monologue, boy, it just feels heavy with the overacting. It's just like overemphasis, and it's just it's one of the things I don't like about this. It's just like it's a whole lot of blah. It's just like melodrama nonsense, and it doesn't feel appropriate for what we've gotten out of this show so far. But I mean,
I think it's just them trying to, like, oh, we're in England, so let's do Shakespeare.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a stereotype kind of thing.
Yeah, and to continue the Shakespeare comparison with the, murder stuff, it's a little ham-fisted, but it works. They move Roger's car. They are about to exit the theater, but Joe the handyman is still there. They're trying to wait for everybody to leave. They offer to him Nick and Lillian. They offer him to close up the theater. They bribe him with money and say, just go to the pub. We'll take care of it. Go to the pub. We got it. No worries.
Yeah.
So they take the trunk. They grab Roger's stuff, his umbrella and coat and hat, and then take the body in the trunk out of the theater and then drive out to the Haversham estate. Nobody is home. It's pitch dark. Lillian puts Roger's coat, his hat and umbrella back in some like drawing room closet.
Which, okay, here's my thing. I see what they're trying to set up. How did she have a key to the house?
Well, I think the implication is that she, because she has been courting him, if you will, or seducing him, whatever you want to call it. She knows his habits. She knows the secret stuff. Plus, they still have the body, so they would probably have his keys.
You know what? Fair point. Fair enough. I concede.
Yeah, so while Lillian is putting the belongings back in the drawing closet, Nick is in Haversham's office, and he grabs a copy of Alice in Wonderland and opens it up and lays it down flat. So it's not a book that has a bookmark in it. He is trying to simulate somebody has read a book and then left it.
But John, this must be just like an everyday copy, one that you've turned the pages through 1,000 times, right?
No, we're going to learn something very interesting later on in I think the next act about this book. So just keep that in mind, good listeners. So they simulate his body having fallen down the stairs. They don't toss him down the stairs. They just make it look like he fell, and they put him at the end of the staircase. And I got to say, I really liked how this scene was framed, because you have the Haversham's body there, and you have Nick frame, doing, making sure it fits whatever the scene is, and then you have Lillian at the banister of the staircase. I just really like the distance between them two, because I mean, as much as they play as a good married couple, they're anything but that. So, and I felt like the space between them was a nice physical representation of that distance and what comes later at the end of the episode.
But it also shows that even though they're a distant relationship couple, that they're still a great team. Together they make I shouldn't say great, they make a good team.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the chemistry for both of these actors really isn't there, but I do concede that they are able to create plans like this and adapt very quickly.
They're able to know each other well enough to put each other in positions like actors do, put themselves in positions that are favorable. I'll concede to a point, instead of good couple or good partners, that they just know each other well enough to say, okay, you do this, I'll do this, I'll set this up, and they know each other's tendencies well enough to know that they'll get that particular job done.
Yeah, and I gotta say that the final line as they exit the scene, Honor Blackman says he had a dirty mind, and honestly, I feel like that's her best. That's the moment she's at her best. That one line. But I also wanted to talk to you about what did she mean? We get nothing about that.
Yeah, how I took it was that she's trying to justify the murder and trying to justify that he was a bad person, and by he just wanted like sexual favors out of her or a relationship out of her, so he just had a dirty mind, I guess.
I mean, that's certainly possible, but I think we're also kind of touching upon something that you and I discussed off mic, which is this episode is very inconsistent in its pacing. Right. And I think part of it is that we don't get much of anything establishing that these three people had some kind of friendly relationship in some form.
Right. Exactly.
And maybe we could have gotten more stuff that established, yes, he had a dirty mind, or something that established that, beyond their professional relationship, there was a friendship between all three of them. But we don't get that. We just get straight to the nitty gritty of it. And I think the episode's less for not giving us that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I agree with you, John, but as the scene comes to a close, we open on an airport shot.
Yeah, Heathrow Airport. And the good lieutenant has made his way to London. Apparently, Scotland Yard has invited an American detective as an honored guest. And apparently, Scotland Yard can't find Columbo.
Yeah. And again, it plays into one of my favorite little themes of like Columbo's not what people expect him to be, right? The whole like they're probably searching for like a James Bond figure, if you will, and they're like, oh, you're the one we're talking about. You're the one.
Especially considering that during this whole scene, Columbo's looking for his luggage, his baggage is missing, and he's trying to find this purple suitcase with flowers on it.
Oh, and he is just makes this one lady's night or day or whatever just a living hell.
Yeah, I mean, there's one lady that has the same similar suitcase, and she just is like the coldest person, and I was surprised at how she unhelpful she was trying to be. The second woman that you mentioned, Anthony, who had her day essentially ruined because Columbo just pulled out all of her clothes accidentally. Because he did that, Columbo gets pulled aside by airport security because they think he's a thief.
Yeah, it's a great scene overall, John. Like, this is one of the highlights of the episode for me. It's just Columbo's making this big fuss. He's trying to find his luggage, and you and I have been through TSA. We know how crappy it can be. We know how stressful it can be. I've had to move multiple times via airplanes with multiple cases of luggage, so I could relate to poor Columbo and how fussy he can get. And it's just Sergeant Keith meets Columbo eventually before they throw him up into the clink for being like a thief. And, Keith reads those other beat patrol cops. He reads them and says, oh, come on, Columbo, let me go. Scotland Yard will be on the case of your missing suitcase. I need to take you where you got to go.
Also, would Scotland Yard actually look for a missing suitcase? I doubt that, right?
I doubt that, but I think it just kind of plays to the episode's themes.
I will say I do appreciate a very excited Columbo. It's very endearing.
Oh, his cheesy smile was the best, man. It was so cute. Yeah. So cute. He's like, oh, great. Oh, my God, I'm here in England. Oh,
so exciting. It's so exciting. This is such a pleasure to be here. And then I get into tourist antics. That's what I called those scenes. It's just tourist antics.
And here's the thing. I enjoyed this first run of tourism. I love seeing it. I'm sitting here going like, is this actually Peter Falk or is this him acting? Like, I feel like this is actually Peter Falk just trying to get snippets of film of some of these great things.
Or maybe somebody told him, hey, we got 2 days here. You got to make it quick. We only got one take. Go.
Exactly, right? And I appreciated this, but what I don't appreciate is that they play into this same scene like several more times throughout the episode.
Yeah, it gets weirdly paced. It's endearing to see Columbo this excited, but ultimately, with like one exception, maybe it feels like we're just too much in a hurry, and these just tourist things just happen because they want to give people a glimpse of London,
right?
And what's funny is that there's such a glaring difference between the episodes that were clearly shot in California and then the ones that were shot in London.
Yeah, stuff happens.
Because this is one of the few episodes where there is a out of U.S. Shoot, but there's a reason that they had to shoot in California, which I will get to when it comes up. Because honestly, the actor gave me the most perfect timing for it, but we'll get into it when we get there.
And speaking of things that we need to get to, John, we need to get to the fact that they finally get to New Scotland Yard.
Yeah, upon which we're giving a very confusing explanation about what the difference between old and New Scotland Yard is. I'm not going to give it much of a description outside of that because I got confused and Columbo got confused. But we're introduced to Dirk, the chief inspector. Whatever, I can't remember his full title because it's way too many words. We learn that his wife had a death in the family, but something about it is rather odd. So Dirk would like to pull Columbo in instead of going to, the police academy. They're going to go investigating.
Well, he doesn't even phrase it that we need to go investigate this because it's odd. It's just like, yeah, death in the family. My wife's uncle, thrice removed. I just got to go see, got to go wrap it up just to see if, just to ease her mind. And unfortunately, I got to take you along because we're already late for our thing. And I like Dirk's kind of disdain for Columbo here because he's expecting, again, like a James Bond figure, but he's seeing this ruffled trench coat of a man.
Can I just say how funny it is that you're describing British people's perceptions of an American through a British character?
Yeah, actually, when you sit back and think of it. Oh, my goodness gracious. But, John, as they roll into their car, I think we need to roll into the end of this act and into Act 2.
We pull up on Sir Roger Haversham's estate, where we meet Tanner, the butler, who found the body, and we meet the police constable there.
Oh, but John, you skipped over one of the best lines. They're at the front door, and Columbo goes, "Oh, this must be one big family." Because he's just looking and gazing upon this huge mansion.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happens when you have a big estate in California, but it's the UK. So we meet Tanner, the butler. We meet the local constable. We learn that it's presumed that Sir Haversham fell down the staircase and was killed by presumably a head injury there.
And I mean, this constable is just, I know we made the joke of Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins with his awful accent, but I'm just like, is this Dick Van Dyke in disguise playing this constable? Because he's like, "Oi, governor, he just took a spell down the stairs and bumped his head."
It's not as bad as the maid that shows up with the beer for the constable.
That's right. Just shows up
with beer. Which, I love the reveal of the beer because it feels like, okay, local constable, he might have a pint here and there. He doesn't have anything to worry about. But boy, that actress did not even try to do an accent.
No, not even close.
At all. To get back to murder, because that is our profession, homicide. We learned that the estimated time of death is around midnight based on the rigor mortis, and then we get Columbo investigating around Roger Haversham's office. He observes the fact that there's a framed picture of Lillian Stanhope, plus the promo poster for the play. He also notices the book that is laid flat. He pulls on the bell cord to call the butler, doesn't think it works. And then Tanner shows up and Columbo's just trying to figure out where Tanner was. Why was Haversham in the office fully clothed? Why did he go downstairs? What was he going for? Why not ring for the staff? According to Tanner, Haversham was rather considerate. So he's just like, at a certain hour, he's not going to bother people.
Yeah. He's a very considerate master, as I drone on about being a butler.
And put John to sleep because I am talking so slow.
Yeah, pretty much.
We also learned that, Columbo also learns that Haversham was fully dressed. So Columbo's confused. So he's reading in his office in his favorite chair. He's not comfortable at all. He has a tie on and a full suit. He's not in a smoking jacket. He's not in a drinking jacket. And Columbo also notes that how the book was treated was odd because it's that particular book of Alice in Wonderland, Anthony, which we mentioned earlier. It's a first edition. It's a very valuable book. And to put the book like it was discovered would damage the spine and therefore nuke the value of the book. And somebody of Haversham's stature would not do that to that kind of a book.
Yeah, because he was a well-read man. He understood. He liked his valuable collection of books, and he wouldn't have just picked up a book and broken the spine like that of something that was worth, quite a pretty penny, or, pretty quid.
Yeah, and Columbo also asks about reading glasses. So Haversham, being an older man, used reading glasses, but always kept them close. They would have been in his breast pocket. No one knows if it was smashed or not.
And can we go into the fact that Columbo's not asking Tanner this? He's using Chief Inspector as like a satellite to ask all of these questions.
I'm glad you brought that up because I figure he's doing that as a courtesy so that he's not stepping on toes. He's just using Dirk as a way to progress Dirk's investigation.
Right.
But
and it's funny, it's cute, and it also, like, Columbo gives this all-knowing look in his eyes when Dirk's like, yeah, I ordered an autopsy just to give it a go, just to see, with all of these glasses and confusion that I just so happen to observe.
Yeah, so, I mean, I agree that, his assessment of Columbo at first was a little harsh because he was expecting somebody a little bit more more put together, but I think Dirk is almost as astute as Columbo, so he's just like, yeah, something's up here. I want your opinion because, you are going to view things differently than I do, and that might give me something more interesting to follow up on than I would have found on my own.
And speaking of things that are more interesting, we go to a scene change where we go back to the theater, and we see that it's become a wake.
Which is awkward.
Which is just awkward. This entire scene just felt awful.
Yeah, and then we get more overacting by Lillian and Nick, and the press is there for some reason, and she's putting on the works. Does anybody buy it? I didn't buy it. I mean, we have the benefit of knowing the full story, but it's just like, oh my God, it's pathetic.
Yeah, and I think because there's one like little reporter there who's kind of snarky, so I think he's like seeing through it all because he makes like some snide comments to them and everything.
And it doesn't help that Miss Dudley shows up and then Nick's jaw drops to the floor in front of his wife and like half a dozen people.
Yeah, it was just. And the one scene that really irked me from this particular moment, one moment that irked me, John, was that when she is like fake bawling her eyes out and like Nick goes to like grab her and says, okay, no cameras. And then they say, oh wait, hold that pose for me, please. And he just kind of grabs her and poses her and just takes, and then have their picture taken. And then he's like, oh my goodness, no more. And it sickened me to the point that, again, this was shot back in 1972, but it kind of made me think of today's society and how we play like all these little things, and we always have to just catch a minute of fame whenever it gets tossed at us, even in these dire moments. And it just kind of sickened me a little bit, to be quite frank.
No, I agree, and I think that's done on purpose because we're dealing with the fact that these are two actors who are past some kind of prime,
yeah,
and are trying to jockey back into some kind of status. Speaking of jockeying for something, Columbo hands Lillian a handkerchief because she is still bawling, which I don't know if it's genuine or not, but he tries to get some information out of her about the nature of the relationship with Haversham. And he's also jockeying for tickets because he wants to be able to see what they're doing and understand, because the show's still going on despite Haversham's death, and it's probably going to be due a ticket bump. But and then another side point, I love that Columbo just says, oh, I'm just a visiting fireman, which is I've never heard that phrase used in regard to police, but it's just like, the way Columbo said it, it's like, you know what, I'll buy it.
Yeah. And again, I could tell Columbo's not buying it. Like, he's seeing through these people and seeing through this act entirely. He's like, okay, nobody, I don't think he's actually pegged the murder on these folks yet. He's just like, okay, dude, you're overdoing it here.
I think he's suspicious of Lillian because she was so prevalent in Haversham's office. So that's what gets his attention. But I don't know if he has 100% made a decision at that point. And we learned the real reason that Dirk and Columbo are here. They're here to arrange examination of the body for an autopsy.
Right, which Lily overhears.
And freaks the hell out over.
And freaks out. And so she goes backstage with Nick. I'm assuming this is after the wake. And she talks to him about it. And they don't know what to do. And then in the funniest scene from this entire thing that I had to stop, rewatch, and laugh, John, Nick out of nowhere goes, "Ha! Do you not remember this? Because it was.
I remember it. I'm just trying to figure out what the context of it was.
They were trying to figure out, okay, an autopsy is going to be done. What's going to happen? What we have to set it up further. And Nick apparently comes on this genius idea. And instead of going like, "Hey, I got it. Like, we'll do this, this, and that," he just out of nowhere just yelps, "Huh!"
Yeah, and then we don't even get told of it. It just cuts to more tourist shoe leather.
Exactly, which was like, what just happened? Because literally you just hear Nick go, "Huh! You have to wear a face," and he quotes another line from the play, and just like instantly go to another tourist shoe leather.
It's awkward, and it's just weird. And we're not going to get into the tourist shoe leather because it's just too much. You know, it's the same. It's almost the same thing as before.
Yeah, exactly.
But we go to what looks like a gentleman's club,
Like a proper one.
Yeah, like an old timey English gentleman's club. And did you feel like Columbo was not a fan of being there?
At first, yes, because in his mind, he's like, "Oh, we're just gonna get like little, measly little sandwiches or something." But he's like hungry. He's been running around until he figures out, like, "No, dude, we actually serve full course meals here." And then Columbo's like, "Oh my gosh, I thought we were getting little sandwiches." And then the funniest line that literally, I stopped and laughed because it's just the pure humor, not of the irony of it. Like an older man who's serving them this lunch goes, "Why do you think we keep the ladies out, sir?" It's just like, what?
Yeah, but my read of Columbo's body language in that scene was like he's just like he's upset at the fact that they're being kept out, and it's just like, why would you do this? Why is this a thing? I don't understand it. That was my read of it, and just based off of like, because after that waiter says that line, Columbo just dead eyes him, just like stares him down, and just like something about it made me feel like he's not happy about being here.
I see. I was just too busy still laughing just because that line came out of nowhere off the top.
That's a funny line. It's just like his body language just didn't match for me.
Yeah,
like something felt off. But
and then we get some more comedic moments here, some vaudeville, if you will, where essentially the Emmy comes, and he comes with all the photos of the body and cut up, and poor Columbo is trying not to look at these pictures as he's trying to eat his lunch.
I know. And the important information that we learn here is that the body was moved. He did not die at his home based on rigor mortis and the bruising of the blood pool as his body, just rested. He was killed somewhere else or died somewhere else and then was later moved. And the cause of death was a brain hemorrhage. So they know what killed him. They just know that where he was found was not his location of death. At this point, we go back to the Haversham estate, which is going to be a recurring theme in this episode.
Yeah, because we didn't get enough of it the first 10 times.
Yeah, so Nick and Lillian return, and they call Tanner, and they have a very awkward conversation about missing Roger. And Nick brings up this story about a very particular copy of Macbeth that was owned by Sir Henry Irving, who we as Americans, I guess, don't really know. We learn later in another scene, or in the same scene, but later on, that Irving was a very well-known British actor, probably the most famous British actor.
Yeah, and because they just scoff at Columbo that he doesn't know. Hey, who's this Irving fellow? And everyone's like, oh pish posh, you Americans.
Yeah, so this particular copy has that actor's notes in it, and Nick is saying it was his and he loaned it to Roger. He's looking to get it back before the estate divvy stuff up. To which Tanner says, we'll make sure we get ahead of those stupid tax people, which is hilarious because the reason that this episode was filmed partially in the UK and partially in California is that actor Wilfrid Hyde-White was a tax refugee from the UK.
Get out of town.
Yeah. It had to. So they had to shoot the scenes with Tanner in California because he was a tax exile and he owed thousands to the United Kingdom.
And so they had to. my thing is he wasn't that crucial of a character to have him.
Not at all.
To have him like, nope, sorry, I can't go there. It's like, okay, we're just going to cast some, in my mind, cast some other just old British guy.
Yeah. So the reason they had to shoot in California, that guy, because he didn't pay his taxes.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
It is hilarious. Speaking of hilarious, while Tanner and Nick go off to look for this book, Lillian sneaks off for whatever reason and sees that Columbo and Dirk have showed up. And Dirk and Columbo are surprised that Nick and Lillian are there. And Columbo notices Haversham's car being washed and notices a detail about the car. Anthony, do you remember what that was?
Yeah, there was a couple little drops there, water.
Yeah, water spots. It looked like
spots.
It had been out in the rain and the water just dried on it. And it had been washed every single day. So if Roger Haversham didn't leave, his car would have been washed.
Yeah.
But
and, John, do you remember if it was raining in California there at the state?
Well, in the United Kingdom by way of California, in that area, there was no rain, but in London there was.
United Kingdom by way of California. Sorry, that just tickled me.
I mean, if we were doing Loungecast, that would be the episode.
That'd be the episode title. Oh yeah, 100%.
So they have this conversation about they can't find this book. They set up. Nick and Lillian set up this whole. We finally figure out what the plan is. They're trying to set up that a thief came in to steal this very valuable copy of Macbeth and got into a struggle with Haversham, and that's how he was killed.
But again, it's like a half-assed plan. That's like, okay, so they just stole one book.
Yeah, and what's funny is that Stanhope and Frame think that they've just found the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, because and then again, in like the weirdest line, Superintendent, whatever all the titles, ABC, essentially tells them like, okay, no, don't worry, we'll look for it, and don't worry, my boy, you've already been a big help.
Yeah.
As if like, oh, by George, you cracked this case for us, Nicholas.
Yeah, and I question how much Dirk buys it because Columbo doesn't really buy it, but
no, Dirk buys it hook, line, and sinker. Columbo doesn't buy it.
Yeah, Columbo doesn't buy it, and we get that when we go to the theater, and it's a busy night. We're after the performance, and there's a I'm assuming an Indian gentleman with a really rad 70s turban. It's like shiny.
It was. I don't even know how to describe it, John. It was like a disco turban.
Yeah, some guy in a disco turban. Everybody's celebrating a very successful opening night. Not Dirk. Frame and Stanhope are being brown nosed by everybody that they know, and in comes Columbo, who's trying to see what their story is. So we get a very nice interchange between Columbo talking to Frame and Columbo talking to Lillian.
I really like that interchange. That was excellent, and just the way they directed that literally kind of highlighted the fact that their stories were just word for word, syllable for syllable, 100% the same. Yeah,
and Columbo learns of the fight that they had, that they are claiming to have had between themselves, but in reality was with Haversham. He learns that from Joe the handyman. And Columbo puts out the theory, he must have went somewhere. There's rain spots on his car. There was no rain where he was, so he had to have left. And I got to say that there's a moment where Frame gets very hot and bothered with Columbo and starts blustering, and
it was out of nowhere too, John.
Yeah,
it was like 100% like a switch just flipped.
Yeah, and then he says this, what I honestly think was a very stupid line. It's like, love, you're trying to put us into a love triangle like a stupid American or something like that. I don't remember the exact line, but I just remember thinking, wait, love triangles aren't exclusively an American thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just like, don't be assuming just because Columbo comes from a different country that, he's presuming something bad.
Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
just the press did it for him already. It's just like the British press was saying, "Oh, Haversham and Stanhope are having fun and tickling each other's daisies," or whatever the hell they say it. And I know from stories that the British paparazzi are a lot more aggressive than they are here in the States.
Yeah.
So Columbo would have heard some probably really raunchy stuff.
Oh, for sure. For sure. So essentially, we established the fight was there, and they try to play it off. And that's how there was the Brooklyn necklace, which Columbo stepped on during, the brown nosing that we mentioned, the John. And again, they do this really like vaudevillian act where it's like, oh yeah, I smacked her around. She smacked me around. Huh? We're such a happy couple, as he like swoons her in his arms. And Columbo's like, oh yeah, hey, that's a great performance you just gave. Which I really love that line. Really love that line.
I thought this is one of the highlights of the episode because it was just such a subtle but very obvious dig that he knew that they were full of it. And then he goes on to support that by saying, when my wife and I are trying to remember an event, we both have our own recollection of it. It's never the same. But what's funny about your story, it's almost 1-to-1. Isn't that funny?
Exactly. So, John, from here, they leave the theater, and something about an umbrella, John.
Yeah. So Joe shows up and is helping them into Nick's car, and they notice the umbrella, and it turns out that I guess Lillian grabbed the wrong umbrella because somebody beat her to it. It seems like Joe mistakenly grabbed Roger Haversham's umbrella, which was a very particular gift from somebody he knew, and it was engraved for him. So now they have to get the umbrella back, which leads to pub shoe leather.
Yeah, it was. This scene should have just been cut down. They should have just cut straight to them playing darts and him grabbing the umbrella, John. Honestly,
maybe so. There's a way to have made it a lot faster because the whole thing Nick needs to do is just get Joe drunk so he could take the umbrella without issue.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciated Joe playing quote unquote playing the fool and winning Nick out of his money, playing darts like that was okay, but just outside of that, it felt like it was 10 minutes too long.
Yeah, and then the scene transitions after Nick and Lillian leave, and it's pouring rain, and Joe is encountered by Columbo, and Columbo's trying to figure out, because Joe's a stage manager as well as a handyman, so if anybody would know if Roger Haversham was at that theater, it would be Joe, and Columbo knows that.
Yeah,
and Joe has been working for this theater for 20 years. He has never seen Sir Roger Haversham on rehearsal day in all of those 20 years.
Yeah. And Columbo's at this point trying to just grasp any information in the pouring rain from this obviously drunk man. And he's grasping at straws until, John, we get a key piece of information from Joe the handyman.
Yeah, that he had an umbrella, and that it was missing after he spent an evening drinking with Nicholas Frame, which Columbo side finds peculiar. It's like, why would Nicholas Frame be drinking with you, and why would your umbrella be stolen? Who would steal it? Which he blames like hippies, I guess. But I mean, Columbo's confuses to wait. Why is there a fixation on this umbrella by Nicholas Frame?
Exactly. And John, amidst all the confusion, one thing is clear. We've come to the end of Act 2.
That means it's time to drown our fears like tears in the rain in Act 3.
Really, Blade Runner?
I ran with it. I don't promise it to be good.
I'm keeping that part in up until this particular sentence.
That's fair. Anthony, we open up again once again
Oh, God.
at the Haversham estate, where Nick and Lillian have once again returned in the dead of night. Tanner has let them in. He's being kept in the main house so that they could counter any threat of further burglary. And we learned that, the Dirk has ordered nothing else be touched. And Nick is using the excuse of let's find my book again in order to give Lillian time to replace the umbrella. But then she learns that the closet or the drawing room, whatever, that she had placed Roger's belongings before has now been cleaned out. So she can't leave the umbrella there without it being very obvious that somebody left it there.
Yeah, in a surprise twist that a wax museum took everything for an exhibit to show Haverstrom as well as this play that just like I don't get it.
Yeah, and I got to say that Honor Blackman's reading of Who was very odd, because it's just like this very over exaggerated like sense of confusion, I guess.
Yeah, no, it kind of mirrored my own because I'm like, what, a wax museum? Like I feel like she just read that and she's like, wait, what? Did you just add this in the past 3 minutes that that we've done this?
Yeah, and then they just they make all this show about staying for drinks, and then it's suddenly leaving. Honestly, for me, I felt like they couldn't have been acting more suspicious.
Oh yeah,
considering what happens a little bit later, you know what? I think they kind of just did it to themselves. But Columbo is on his way to the Haversham estate, almost gets smacked by Nick's car because they bolt out of that driveway like a bat out of hell.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. So Columbo rings the bell. Tanner comes back down and Columbo gives you spiel. I'm looking for the umbrella. And Tanner goes, okay, well, follow me.
Yeah.
And
then,
it's a quick cut. It's like, okay, follow me. Boom. We're at the wax museum with Nick and Lily there.
Yeah. And my question is, did they both need to go in there? Couldn't she have just been like at home or waiting in the car?
Or, like a lookout person to knock on the glass window twice if somebody suspicious is coming.
Yeah, but then she's just there to make this like bad Hammer horror gasp at the wax head of Roger Haversham.
Yeah. I mean, there is some good banter here. Like she's like, oh, I've always wanted to be in a horror movie. And Nick turns to her and says, well, you got the looks for it. And I'm like, okay, we got some banter, I guess, between the two
Some
of them.
screwed up banter, I will say that much.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't great. It was just okay. Some intriguing banter.
So they're doing all of this in the throes of the evening. The next day, Dirk arrives at the museum, and Columbo's already there. And we get what's bothering Columbo this week. What's bothering Columbo is that the nature of what happened to Roger means that whoever staged the scene knew the layout of the Haversham house, and they knew Roger's habits very well. That means that it's somebody he knew. And if Columbo can find that his umbrella, this very particular umbrella, is missing, it would place him somewhere else other than his house. And if he can find a way to place it at the theater, that means that he's got a stand open frame where he wants them. But the fix is in. They were able to switch the umbrellas. Tanner confirms that the umbrella is Roger Haversham's. And Columbo suspects, well, somebody else must have asked you about umbrellas, right? And Tanner says, why no, nobody came asking for umbrellas. You're the only one.
Yeah, and it's very odd.
Yeah, very odd. And we get the explanation as to why that's the case pretty quick.
Before we switch the scene, John, I want to take a second and really appreciate Falk's acting in this. His very much deadpan, like, no, that's wrong. You have to be wrong. There's something, I already fixed this in my mind. This has been already fixed. So it kind of just lent me a little deeper into the character of Columbo, right? Because if something doesn't go 100% the way he planned it out, because he knows, it throws him through this hugest loop. And it just, I don't know, I just really appreciate it. I felt like I got a better sense of Columbo, an even deeper sense of Columbo just in this scene, to where he's just like aghast. He's trying to grasp for straws. He's trying to figure out, because he knows for 100% fact that umbrella should have been here. And
Yeah.
it was kind of interesting. Maybe like a little OCD kind of a moment. You know what I mean?
Maybe. I mean, I think it's probably a larger discussion as to whether or not Columbo falls into like an OCD pattern or somewhere on the on autism spectrum, maybe. But I agree. The relentlessness at which Columbo is absolutely sure that what they are telling him is not correct.
Yeah.
Is a fascinating character moment.
Yeah. And he doesn't even ask, like, are you sure? He just says, you're wrong. You have to be
Yeah.
wrong. Like,
And yeah, I honestly, and according to Columbo File, this is one of Peter Falk's least favorite episodes because he feels like it's too gimmicky with the location.
yeah.
Which I get, but honestly, as always, I think the one exception might be Dead Weight, where Falk is probably very weak, but he's giving a very nuanced performance of Columbo here, and it's still very, very welcome. Now we move to a hotel. I'm guessing. I'm not sure. I'm guessing it's their apartment, but Nick and Lillian are reading reviews of the play, and her reading face is very exaggerated and very hard to watch because there's too much movement in her eyebrows, and it's just like I don't know what to look at. That's just for me.
Yeah.
And Nick's ego is very showing here because like he peaks up when he gets mentioned, and he doesn't praise his wife whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. He actually even swaps the papers once he hears about the great review that he got.
Yeah, so they're very chuffed and they're very excited. Oh, we got our status back. We're good. And then Tanner shows up.
Yeah, and he shows up with a bag of croissants for breakfast, and he's starting to clean the apartment. And he's like, well, I'm going to be your new butler now, in oh so many words.
Which is such a baller move.
It was a baller move. Like, that's a great way to blackmail somebody.
Yeah, so Anthony and I are more or less burying the lead here. Tanner knew that they were looking for the umbrella to, plan it back so that they wouldn't get caught. So he knows that they probably killed Haversham, but when a master dies, you have to work to set up future employment. So that's what Tanner is doing here. He is blackmailing the Nicholas Frame and Lillian into employing him so that he doesn't tell the police that he knows that they committed a murder.
Yeah, and we also find out in this scene, John, that he is the one that told his master, Sir Haversham, thank you, Roger. That's what I was shooting for, Sir Haversham. That this was all a facade, and that Tanner read through it, so he told Sir Haversham, and that's when Sir Haversham drove down and died.
Yeah, in other words, Tanner was a gossipy turd and was just doing it to leverage himself into a better position. So
now
now
he was trying to protect his master and told him that he's looking out for his master, so he's being loyal in his mind
and being a gossipy turd.
Yeah, actually, absolutely.
It's the concept of, and Anthony, you can be loyal and a gossipy turd.
Well done, John. Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
So we go back to an exterior shot because you can tell because it's a little hazy and it's not sunshiny, bright California. So
it's England by way of California.
Yeah, no, later on.
Right.
Later on. So Columbo's conversation with Dirk, and Dirk's doing this walk and talk about police procedure, and Columbo's just by a trash can eating fish and chips, which is great.
Yeah, just eating it by a trash can.
Yeah. And they have a conversation about Big Ben and the frustrations about this investigation, because at this point they don't have anything on Frame and Lillian. There's nothing to really pin them, but it's still bugging Columbo. And we go to London by way of California in the Universal backlot. Because that's where we find Lillian and Nick in the Universal backlot buying a bicycle. And I thought they were looking to get an umbrella because I'm not really sure what they were doing at first. But we
I'm
find
sorry,
that
I'm still reeling. Sorry, John, you're gonna have to carry this for a couple.
I know. I got you. I got you, buddy. So they get a bicycle and then take off, and then it turns out that Nick has gone off to the Haversham estate, specifically to Tanner's off-site residence. He has his own little private home, separate from the main house, and he has brought some books that Nick told him to bring, and Nick, welcomes have Tanner back into his house, and then the maid, we get a transition. It's clearly later in the day,
but he doesn't welcome him, John. Tanner sees the bicycle. Tanner goes and he knows something's up. He's like, why isn't he bring his car? So he knows he's going to get murdered here.
Probably,
And Nick essentially, he's trying to say, oh no, sir, you enter the residence first. And Nick just practically throws him in there. And then we come to find out in the scene change,
that the maid discovers Tanner's hanging body, and we learn that it's a apparent suicide. And we go to Columbo at the park, reading next to a very old man feeding pigeons. And Columbo's just frustrated.
Was it a lady? I think it was a lady.
Was it? I don't know. He had the person had a pipe. I thought it was a guy.
Women can smoke pipes too, John.
I mean, that's fair. I couldn't tell. They were very particularly elderly, and I couldn't tell gender. So I'm just gonna say they. Columbo's sitting next to a very fine person, elderly person who is feeding animals. They look old. We can't tell which. I'm gonna get off of this now. Boy, we're losing the thread right at the end. Damn it!
Right at the end, man.
But this is where we got to keep it tight. So Sergeant O'Keefe shows up, and Columbo has been reading the paper next to this elderly person, and Columbo's very frustrated because the paper has reported that Tanner is likely the killer of Roger Haversham.
And John, he finds us out sitting next to the old person, doesn't he?
Yes.
Okay,
I mentioned there was an old person.
Just checking. I'm just checking.
I'm sorry. I got nervous and then I rambled. So Columbo is frustrated at the fact that that's what the press is assuming, that Tanner killed his employer in order to steal merchandise, and then when things were starting to look dicey, he hung himself to not get arrested. And Columbo feels guilty because now he just caused all this frustration for nothing, and he can't prove anything. And then he notices something on the paper, Anthony.
Why, yes, he does.
Yes, he notices that the Wax Museum exhibit that Roger Haversham is getting a statue at, and both Stanhope and Frame are getting one as Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. That's opening the day Columbo is leaving, and Columbo tells O'Keefe, we got to go there. We also need to stop to buy me an umbrella.
Yeah. And I again, I mentioned how much O'Keefe's a really minor character in here, but I really like O'Keefe is just like, yeah, okay. I mean, you're the VIP. You're the man. Let's do what you got to do, man.
Yeah. So we cut to the museum. There's a big crowd that's, I guess, waiting for a wax museum or just waiting to get autographs from Stanhope and Frame. They're there for autographs. It's like a big what to do with press and whatnot. I got to say, Honor Blackman's outfit in this is weird and crazy, and I kind of love it because it's like this weird, like, fringe at the sleeves and the end of her blouse.
It's 1970s fashion, baby. That's all it is.
It's like pure unadulterated 1970s fashion just shot into your veins.
Yep, exactly. 100%.
So, and Dirk arrives not too long after them, and they're looking around the exhibit. And then Columbo arrives with O'Keefe and the new umbrella, and they Nick and Lillian had been invited to see the exhibit prior to opening it to the press, and Columbo, does the whole spiel about best souvenir to get would be an umbrella, considering everything has kind of focused on an umbrella in this investigation, huh? And Columbo's like, let's look at the statues. Let's look at the statues. We came all this way to look for the statues, so let's look at the statues. So we get a view of the Frame and Stanhope statue, and her statue doesn't even look like her.
No, yeah. I mean, they are not great representations of both of them.
Not at all. And Nick starts getting that faux flustered again that he did earlier, all bluster and whatnot. And it leads to then Columbo asking the museum manager to open up the Haversham statue exhibit. The waterworks happen from Lillian, and Nick starts blustering and saying it's a shame, they shouldn't have put that up there, and all this nonsense. And Columbo makes the most gallows humor joke, talking about hanging up a figure of Mr. Tanner as well.
Yeah, that
hanging
was odd.
up, my God.
Yeah, that was just an odd, dark gallows humor turn I did not see coming.
Yeah, and it completely passed me over the first time I watched it, but I'm just like, good Lord, how could you get that dark that quick, Columbo? Jesus.
Yeah, and
so Columbo starts laying down his theory. He thinks that Nick and Lillian killed Tanner,
and he bluntly tells them, and that's why I appreciated the balls on Columbo at that point. Just be like, no, yeah, I know you murdered him. Yeah,
it's really obvious. And once I prove where Roger drove off to, I'm probably going to get you there too. And then and Columbo starts talking about how the whole time he's been in London, he's been watching how people handle their umbrellas. How they close them, how they shake, how they shake off the water, and how they leave the umbrellas open and unclasped, because if you clasp it closed, it's not going to dry properly.
Right.
So Columbo starts saying, he pulls out a piece of Lillian's necklace, the broken necklace that he found, and that was designed by her costumer. He has a little cough and a pause while he reorients himself. And he thinks that, based off of the information that he had, this necklace was broken because the umbrella is probably leaned up against a wall somewhere, and this necklace was violently broken. Maybe a piece of it just fell in.
Yep.
Yeah. And if there's a pearl in that umbrella, that means that Roger Havisham was at the theater and he wasn't at home. And that means he was with you. And that means you had some responsibility in his death.
Yeah.
And then they have the museum manager open up the umbrella. And what falls out, Anthony?
A decorative bead, John. And Nick instantly loses his mind. He starts going back into the monologue tomorrow. Because, again, we've learned that once he gets a lot of anxiety or really worked up, he falls back into the monologue to kind of self-soothe. So he just goes off the rocker, and Lily's freaking out because Nick is gone and mental at this point. And she's just real crying at that point.
Yeah, and she's accusing Columbo of having planted the pearl. And that, doesn't fly, because nobody has managed, that umbrella in any time. There's been no person able to get in because the museum is closed. There's, nobody's handled it. And that leads Lillian to confess as to what happened, that there was an argument and that she threw something at it. It was just purely an accident, but they just were so afraid and that they decided to cover it up. And then they're carted off in front of the public.
Right.
And Dirk has a question for Columbo. How did he know the pearl was in the umbrella?
Yeah, and this, I'll dive into it more in my final thoughts, John. But essentially what we learned from this scene is that, Columbo used a little bit of gray detective work there. And that cough we saw was a distraction. So while he coughed and pointed at the figurine, the wax figurine, and drawed everybody's attention there, he chucked like a marble that bead into the umbrella and planted the evidence.
Yeah, and he did that in order to elicit a response that he would then assumed would lead to a possible confession.
Right. And John, I think this is a great time to go into our final thoughts for tonight's episode, because I want to save my bit and portion about that into mine.
Yeah, so let's lead off into our final thoughts section, which we call Just One More Thing.
And just one more thing.
John, and loyal listeners at home, many episodes ago in Death Lends a Hand, we talked about, and we went into a nice discussion about that gray rope that Columbo sometimes finds himself walking. Yeah. And in Death Lends a Hand, it was essentially a piece of evidence that he plants in the back of the car.
Yeah, planting a contact lens.
And that Ray Milland kind of, has a discussion about that with him. And Columbo in that episode's pretty coy about it. And like, so there's a little bit like maybe he did, maybe he didn't per se. But in this one, Columbo's straight up telling him like, yeah, no, this was a trick I learned in middle school. When I tried to get a pretty girl's attention who sat up front of the class, I would do this trick. And John, we have the hindsight of knowing that these people did this act and committed this crime. But at what point, again, does the means justify the end? Because it's such a tightrope, such a slippery slope that, okay, you plant this piece of evidence here. What's to say another detective plants evidence to try to finally get a conviction out of someone down the road who may, in fact, be innocent?
I mean, I see where the frustration is. I feel like in this circumstance, it feels a little less murky in some regard than it did in Death Lends a Hand.
I see. I don't know. I think it's the opposite. I think it's more so murky. It's clearer that he planted evidence in this one than it is that he planted evidence in the last one.
I mean, but I think the thing is that I feel like he has more supporting evidence against them than I feel like he did Brimmer in Death Lends a Hand.
Fair, but it's still, and again, we know these people are guilty. Columbo knows obviously that they're guilty, and all the evidence points there. But the fact that he still technically planted evidence or false evidence to get a conviction, again, I'm not a police officer, nor will I ever be a police officer, and I don't want to sit here and lecture our fine folks at home about proper, detective means and ways to catch the bad guys. But what I'm saying is that doing things like this provides a reasonable doubt. And again, the English courts may be different than American courts, right? But doing something like this can plant, if it's caught that Columbo did something like this, can plant a reasonable doubt and let killers go free. Or even in a worst case scenario, use a tactic like this to convict people whom are innocent of a crime.
Yeah. So my thoughts aren't as elaborate as yours, unfortunately, but it's just, I think that's just the nature of where we are in viewing this show now, where it's like we're thinking about those concepts a little bit more and more about, is it corrupt to do these things, or is it playing with just murky ethics? And in some regards, some people would say, yeah, it's fine. I mean, he got the confession out of them. And the nature of how Columbo is done as a how do you catch them? We have that hindsight of, we know they did it. It's just a matter of catching them in that lie.
And again, legally speaking, he probably is doing it by the book, and you can actually do that. But I'm talking more so of like the moralistic approach, right? The ethical. And that's legal versus ethical. And that's a conversation for another time, another day, another maybe even podcast, John. But I just had to point that out because, again, it's just another occurrence. And I think this is around the second or third time that this has happened thus far.
I think second for right now. But
it's
a conversation we might have to have like at the end of the series when, we can tally up all of these murky gray ethics situations and see, what it kind of culminates to.
Yeah.
But my thoughts on this episode is that I feel like it's down there with Dead Weight, to be quite honest. I feel like this episode's just way too damn long.
Way too damn long, man.
Way too long. And I think there's a more captivating version of this. I feel like this teleplay needed a little bit more time in the oven. I would have liked a little bit more stuff with Haversham, before the encounter on rehearsal day.
Right.
We don't get anything establishing a significant relationship between them. I'd rather be shown, not told.
Yeah, exactly.
To be quite fair. And I think that I would have liked a little bit less shoe leather in London, but maybe that's just due in part to the fact that they had to film partly in California.
Right.
But I mean, I would like to see some of the characters show up again. Like I would have liked to see another London episode where he and Dirk meet up again and do something else. So I mean, I like what we're given here. I like Dirk. I like O'Keefe. Yeah, they're comrades in arms for Columbo, and they have a certain begrudging amount of respect for him.
Yeah.
But honestly, I don't like Richard Basehart. He's overacting up the wazoo, and I think Honor Blackman outdoes him, but she's also going hard on the overacting, and it's a little much. And I guess I'm just so used to her being a little bit more understated, but
yeah,
that's my main frustration with it.
Yeah, it just felt less Columbo, more vaudeville.
Yeah, that's fair. And I liked Richard Kind's directing for the most part. That the split between or the choices to split the two stories between Nick and Lillian was a good choice. But I mean, and to give Benedictus some credit, it's competent work. He's definitely done better ones so far. But
yeah,
all in all, this felt like a very subpar episode to me. And there's a version of this that is infinitely better. I just don't know if we were ever going to get the chance to see it.
Yeah, and that's fair. And again, I wouldn't put it hand in hand with Dead Weight. Like I think there were maybe a couple more episodes that were worse off than this one in my mind, but I can tell you there were a hell of a lot more better than that this one. And John, I think that's a great way of segueing and ending this tonight's episode, in a way, in a manner, and only you can.
There's no way better than that. Good listeners, you have been listening to another file in the Columbo Files, brought to you by the Ludic Lounge. I have been your co-host, John Soares. With me, as always, the man, the myth, the booty, the legend himself, Antonicus Gluteus Maximus IV. We will see you next time. And until then, I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, this is Peter Falk, and you've been listening to an episode of the Columbo Files, hosted by the Ludic Lounge. And just one more thing. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Ludic Lounge, Anthony at RojoLoco44, and John at just_John_0891. Or feel free to email us at theludiclounge@gmail.com.